It's my great pleasure to welcome my friend, Professor Alexandre de Streel. I have lots of stories, not about wine, but about another liquid product that Belgium makes with very high efficiency and excellence. And with Alex, but I won't bore you with that. Alexandre is a professor at the University of Namur in the French-speaking part of Belgium, and at the College of Europe in the Dutch-speaking part of Belgium. And is also the academic director of the digital program of a think tank called the CERRE, or the CERRE, which is in Brussels, which is in the bilingual part of Belgium. It's a strange place, Brussels, actually. It's hard to define linguistically. Alex is also the chair of the expert group on the online platform economy, advising the European Commission. And when I try to think about what Alex's work, I often think about him as a sort of co-competitor. So we compete as substitutes for relevance in the academic world, and we cooperate in various activities in the policy world to try to convey some messages. In terms of cooperating with policymakers, I always think that Alex is much better than I, and manages to get his and ideas and assistance in much more effective ways than I do. So Alex is the right person for this job today, which is a bit like a sort of ChatGPT, human version of ChatGPT experiments. So we prompted Alex for 1.5 days with a lot of knowledge as a sort of training data. And now we are going to prompt Alex to give us the sort of better version of this. And so we are entrusting your exceptional intelligence, Alex, to enlighten us about where we should go forward. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you very much for those kind words. Maybe I am an algorithm. Maybe we are all, and we don't know, or we are not sure. So who knows? There is a lot of bright mind here, and so I wanted to start with a quote by Einstein, because I think it captured to some extent what we want to do here. When he said, when you change the way you look at things, the thing you look at change. And maybe here we are doing the reverse. I mean, because the things are changing around us because of digital technologies and others, we should change the way we look at them. We should change the look at things, the way we look at things. I think that's really how I would capture what we are trying to do, that, and maybe what you are trying to do with your initiative, and more precisely in a way to try to reconcile the market view of the West Coast with the one of the East Coast or the one of Brussels, and then of course that's not easy, because to change the way you look at things and to change what you have been trained for is not an easy thing. So I have maybe three takeaway from those 2 days, which were really, really interesting. The first thing is how you go from theory to practice, then what kind of new theory you want to develop, or you are developing here, and what it means for practice. But the first thing, and maybe that's the most important thing, is how you go from theory to practice. And here I like very much what Frédéric was saying about having tools good tools which are able to grasp the complexity, because complexity do not mean complex rule. And I think that's an important thing to understand, because very often, the people are afraid about this complexity economics or this dynamic, because they say, yes, but that will lead us to do things which are really impossible or too complex for us, So what really, I think, your initiatives needs to come, and I think that is what I see emerging, is rules which are concrete, rules which are simple and administrable, rules which are predictable, and rules which have some limiting principle. Limiting principle for the authorities, and I mean, we have discussed the Giphy case and how far it has limiting principle for authorities or not, and we saw that the views are divided, but also limiting principle for firms which are advocating it. Because my impression is that if the authority sees the more economic approach, the more dynamic approach, as meaning less enforcement, they will not buy. And in a way, the more economic approach, or the more Chicago economic approach, led to less enforcement, and that is what I think has led to the backlash that we see now. in the antitrust agencies all over the world. So I think it's very important that it is not seen as a way to decrease the enforcement, but just as to change the enforcement. And the second thing, but that's an obvious thing, and I think James mentioned that the importance of dialogue between person and collective task is to improve, and I think this exercise is a perfect illustration of that, the dialogue and building bridge between discipline on the one hand, but also between academics and policymakers. So I think that's what is important, to go from theory to practice. Now, in the theory, what I like here is at least I see four kind of theory emerging. You know, there is the capability theories by David. By the way, there is a lot of David in this conference. So I don't know why, but I mean, this theory that you are developing since several years now, which say, okay, you have to go upstream the innovation value chain, and you have to go within the firm, you know. And I think that's something which it seems to be now well understood, and we could see effort from the policymakers and the agencies to do that. The second thing is the understanding of platform and ecosystem, and the last debate illustrate that very well. But there is one thing where we should progress, is what is the right point for openness of those platform and ecosystem, because you were saying, and you're right, that exclusion is part of the success of this ecosystem and platform. But on the other hand, I mean, exclusions, that seems strange, you know, when you speak with antitrust authority, they say exclusion is bad. So the question is, what are the right point of openness in an ecosystem? And I think there, the DMA try to open as much as we can, and maybe that's not the right approach. The third thing is the explanation of new conglomerate. Gordon explained that very well, and I think that's also useful to understand, to revisit the conglomerate theory. And then the last is the explication of the different type of rent. This is the work you are doing, and I think that's so. I mean, those are four theories which are emerging and which would help the policymaker. And then the last point is, what does it mean in terms of policy making and antitrust or regulatory practice? My impression first is that regulation change more easily than antitrust. You know, if you look at over the last 30 years, we had some change, and I think that it shows that as well in regulation, with adaptive regulation, responsive regulation, and so on. And you know, there is a very good OECD recommendation on agile regulation of 2 years ago, which really captures all the idea that Beatrice presented, and which is showing that regulation is changing, and probably quicker than antitrust. Now, in terms of antitrust, I think we have the definition of market there, and I like your point, you know, where you say, if we are coming back to a kind of structuralist approach, and maybe that's where we are coming back, the market definition is absolutely key. You know, if you don't get the market definition right, you will have a lot of problem. And you know, of course, the authorities are always saying market definition is just a starting point, but you know, it's the way of choosing your path. And I think we have to change the market definition, as David has often said, to go from product to capabilities. On the innovation theory of harm, that's of course what is complicated. And I think a lot of talk have shown that what is the right counterfactual, and how we can determine with sufficient certainty what is the right counterfactual. Now, for that, you have to look at incentive, and that's, I mean, IO economists and antitrust agency are good to do that, but also, and that's a new thing, you have to look within the firm, and you have to look at capabilities, which is the newest part in that. And the last thing, which is to me very important, and maybe also this is something you should look at specifically, is the system of proof under deep uncertainty. You know, no, Mike mentioned that during the debate, but how you reallocate the burden of proof under deep uncertainty, and do you need to change the standard of proof? I think that's an issue in itself which deserves probably more attention. And finally, on regulation, the question we discussed about the Digital Market Act, the question is whether it is based on the right analytical framework, and basically whether, and that's what Elena mentioned at the end of her panel, whether the gatekeeper are an infrastructure or are an organization. Clearly, the DMA sees them more are infrastructure, and this is why openness is seen as a very good thing. But maybe, in fact, it's more, we should see them more organization where, so close point is probably a better thing. So, and the second thing about regulation is, of course, and I will finish with that, is that we need to change also the way we do regulation. And in a way, you know, regulators have a lot to learn from the platform themselves, in the sense that the platform got their success thanks to participation, orchestrating an ecosystem, thanks to experimentation, and thanks to the use of AI technology. And maybe the regulator should behave as a platform. You know this paper, government as platform, but specifically, I think the regulatory authority have a lot to learn from the methods of working that the platform have developed. So what are the next steps? I think that's for you to tell us, but maybe we need another 8 days here, you know, so we will have the 10 days like the Santa Fe creation, and have a kind of this foundational and non-conventional thinking that Brian was mentioning yesterday.
Thank you, Alex. I think you deserve gigantic applause. 10 days ago, there was a big letter against ChatGPT saying ChatGPT has become human competitive. I can tell that ChatGPT has not become human competitive. Like, yeah, it's absolutely. So no, it's great. And actually, you know, if we could hire you from the CERRE to become our academic director, that would help a ton. Yesterday, we actually played with this idea of inviting people for 10 days in Florence. You know, funding would be required to do that. And then we could have 1 day on ecosystems, 1 day on managers, 1 day on dynamic competition, 1 day on capabilities and this and that. So I'm happy to push that forward. You know, when I have when an idea excites me, I'm ready to, you know, push mountains to achieve it, but I'll need support. So we'll need support. So if you have ideas on how to pull this off, much appreciated. Okay, Alex, that was perfect. And it's been recorded, so we're going to draw a lot of inspiration from that.